They said legends don't knock. They arrive like storms with thunder first. The first thing we heard was a polite hail. The Concordium spire had seen 3 millennia of calm debate, carved from living crystal that rang softly when diplomats breathed. 12 species arranged themselves by custom and temperature, the luminous eth circling above like lanterns, the Threxian warriors planted like iron statues, the Verdani unfurling leaves to taste the hall's humid air. The agenda began with mineral tariffs and ended with archaeological curiosities. It changed at the 4th minute. Dr. Leora Venn, archivist of Ors Prime, placed a slab on the dais. The slab looked unremarkable, heat-scored, patched with fused glass until she breathed on it and the surface lit like a night ocean. Text unfolded, not Concord standard, not any branch of language tree we kept. The spire's translators whispered, failed, then clicked in with an embarrassed cough. "We have verified the signal grammar in 6 separate codices," Leora said, voice steady. "It refers to an exodus and to a construction project measured in suns." The hall answered with ritual courtesy, polite disbelief. Myths were a civic utility in the spire. We used them to teach law, not to write it. The human myth was a useful one, a warning about cultures that burned too hot, too fast. They had fought too much. The story said, and the fire ate the house. We filed human next to dragons of the cold void and the city that walked, and carried on with our centuries. Leora did not carry on. She called up a starfield. Thin silver lines drew routes that ran through our maps the way old scars cross new skin. The routes went where we never went, through black-letter quadrants marked generations ago by unknown hands. Quarantine, do not enter. The codices were not histories of a fall, she said. They were itineraries. A murmur, then the familiar anchor of skepticism. Admiral Terk Vor of the Threxians stood, armor catching the hall's light like scales of a patient beast. "The dead do not issue itineraries," he said. "If the humans lived long enough to travel, they lived long enough to die. Show me a ship or show me silence." The spire obliged him with a third option. 8 bells chimed. The great doors parted for a courier whose light body flickered with static. "Outer net reports," she breathed, voice crackling. "Unregistered vessels at the Kuiper Pale, 3 objects, length 3 to 4 kilometers. No entry signatures. They were not there, then they were." We all learned the shape of quiet then, the wide, contained silence that happens when every rational mind takes inventory at once. Leora Venn did not sit. She did not smile. She simply expanded the starfield and let the new icons wink into our system's outer edge like 3 beads of night. A hail arrived, not as a conqueror's trumpet, but as a neighbor's tap on the fence. The voice was clean, unaccented Concord standard with connotations filed neatly where they should be. "This is Fleet Captain Maya Rios of the United Terran Assembly. We detected hazardous resonance from a survey array within your jurisdiction and came to render assistance. Please advise. Do you require evacuation protocol? We apologize for arriving without prior clearance. We can relocate to a holding volume of your choosing." Myth is useful until it talks back. Shock wants company. The delegates found each other's eyes, searching for an expression to borrow. Admiral Vor borrowed none. He addressed the ceiling as if it were a battlefield. "Identify your propulsion, Captain," he said. "Our sensors registered no slip space, no fold signatures. That leaves fabrication or magic." "Gravity is not magic, Admiral," said Captain Rios, not unkindly. "It is patient math. We needed philosophy the way sailors need buoys. High Counselor area of the Eth supplied it." "Captain," she said, voice resonant and layered, "this chamber presumes peace first. Peace assumes knowledge. Offer us knowledge." Rios obliged without flourish. "We are a small advance element," she said, the image tiled to show a ship like a long, dark blade with edges that drank light. "We always send a diplomatic escort first when we suspect a safety breach. Our main forces remain outside your cluster. We come with 2 obligations, first to warn, second to ask." "Warn of what?" Dr. Venn asked, though the codices in her hands already felt heavier. "Of the things that travel in the dark between galaxies," Rios said. of appetites large enough to make myths useful. And ask, Counselor Area said, for permission to help you prepare. It is a strange emotion, respect at first contact. One expects fear, defiance, bargaining. Respect feels like finding an old tool in a new drawer and realizing it fits your hand. Skepticism, honest and earned, persisted. You speak our standard, Admiral Vor said. You answer questions we did not think to ask. You arrive without burning the sky. If you are legends, you are inconveniently courteous. Courtesy is a tactic. Sometimes, Rios agreed. It is also a culture. Where we are from, firefighters ask permission before kicking down a door and kick it down if the smoke is already under it. The spire does not vote on first days. It observes. But the spire also holds doctrine older than custom. When the unknown knocks, you do not debate the shape of its knuckles while the house smolders. You open the door where you can control the hinges. Captain Rios, Counselor Area said, you will bring one vessel. You will remain in an escort envelope designated by our defense grid. You will submit to live translation and continuous recording. If you deviate, we will assume malice. If you comply, we will assume neighborliness. Is that a word in your law? It is a word in our home, Rios said. We accept your envelope. The hall exhaled, not relief but resolve. Legends had knocked, and we had asked them to wipe their feet. As the escort corridors lit in the sky above the spire, Dr. Leora Venn rested her palm on the codex. It warmed under her hand like a living thing. The inscriptions were no longer about ruins. They were about routes, and routes were about choices. The Threxian flagship Iron Current led the escort lattice. 7 Concorde cruisers strung like beads along a calculated arc. Every turret was powered, every safety interlock green. Admiral Terk Vor stood in a brace seat designed for acceleration profiles the ship was not supposed to survive. Threxian doctrine liked to test the words supposed to. The Terran vessel entered the corridor with all the drama of a sunrise. No engine bells, no burn. Space bent the way water bends around a keel. Hull surfaces absorbed light until stars appeared to dim near its edges. The current's inertial monitors whispered alarms, then fell quiet as the corridor's compensators adapted. The human ship adjusted, too. Vor saw the readouts flatten and realized someone over there had politely made room in the math. Admiral, said his tactical officer, Sari, claws ticking on glass, they are transmitting technical notes. Basic gravitational field hygiene for nearby vessels. Vor grunted despite himself. They think we need a lecture on seat belts. I have already improved 3 minor subsystems with their notes, Sari said deadpan. If this is a lecture, I recommend taking notes. The screen bloomed with a face. Medium brown skin, dark hair clipped short, eyes that looked like they spent time outdoors. Fleet Captain Maya Rios wore a uniform austerely practical, a patch on one shoulder, a stylized blue arc crossing a field of stars. She inclined her head, neither bow nor nod, a gesture that suggested she had been briefed on hundreds of cultures and would borrow nothing by accident. Admiral Vor, she said, thank you for the corridor. Permission to keep speeds below what your inertial buffers prefer to call safe. You prefer to call this slow? Vor asked. For a diplomatic approach, she said. Our standard otherwise is designed to be invisible and therefore rude. Rude. We learned long ago, Rios said, that appearing in people's living rooms without knocking makes bad friends and quick wars. The Spire's protocols fed Vor questions, but the important ones were older than any protocol. You said you came to warn, he said. Name the thing. Rios's expression thinned not into fear but into the grim courtesy soldiers share when speaking of storms. We call them eaters of structure, she said. Your scholars may prefer a less theatrical name. They are a phenomenon that behaves like hunger, self-similar, adaptive. They like stars best and don't mind working their way down to bones. And you found them where? Vor asked. First sightings beyond the Perseus void, Rios said. We built monitors in the long dark because that is what you do when you choose not to be surprised twice. They learn from every defense. They have never met a choir. A choir? A defense composed of minds that think differently, Rios said. We sing in certain keys, you sing in others. The eaters don't handle harmony well yet. Kesari pinged the channel with a technical handshake. Your sensor packet shows you detected our survey resonance from outside the cluster, she said. That exceeds our theoretical sensitivity by an impolite margin. Rios did not preen. We choose to overbuild the smoke alarms. Vor folded his arms, weighing tone more than content. The human officer answered like a person used to town halls and classrooms, not authoritarians. No swagger, but no apologies either. He found that insulting to his instincts and pleasing to his judgment at the same time. You carry weapons, he said. Your hull bristles with doors that look like mouths. Yes, Rio said. Peace is a garden. The tools look like knives if you don't plant. The current's medical officer, a Verdani with leaves veined silver, cut in. Captain Rios, our civics curriculum says humans burn themselves. Your presence contradicts our curriculum. We will need a footnote. Make it a chapter, Rios said softly. We fought. We learned to prefer drills to obituaries. Numbers, Vor said, because numbers keep the world honest. How many of you? For this sector. Rios glanced to a side console. Patrol strength is 49 vessels and 3 moving shipyards positioned on your perimeter. Expeditionary strength, if requested and invited, is sufficient. The console chimed again. Our speed will bring us over your capital in 4 hours by your measures, Rios said. We'll stay bright enough for your sensors to track. We'll dull the field when we cross fragile infrastructure. We won't touch your sky without permission. Vor watched the bow of the human ship turn. It did not yaw like vessels of mass should yaw. The stars curved, the corridor's field rippled like silk tugged by a careful hand, and the Terran escort came about as gracefully as a ballerina on a dark stage. You dance for a legend, Kesari murmured. Vor frowned. No, legends dance for themselves. This one watches our footing, too. The spire lit a safe approach cone. Pilots along the corridor straightened like parade lines. Vor opened a broad beam channel to the city below. Citizens of the Concorde, he said, his voice carried by cathedral glass and municipal speakers and a million handhelds. Neighbors are arriving. We will show them our best behaviors and our strictest boundaries. The first is hospitality. The second is law. As the human ship slid toward the capital, Vor considered an old Threxian saying, taught to hatchlings when they picked up practice blades. You do not prove strength by bruising friends. You prove it by making sure no one else can. He hoped the humans believed the same. He suspected they had built a civilization on the hard work of proving it day after day in factories and code and schools. He recognized the look in Rios's eyes. It was the look of someone who had trained so long that courtesy felt like muscle memory. At the edge of the city's sky, the human vessel flared invisible fields to spare glass and birds. Even our weather understood and stepped aside. It is a particular kind of awe, the kind that arrives without breaking a window. The Concordium's deep chamber was designed for bad news. It wore its gravity heavier, its light warmer, so no one mistook this place for the hall where you propose festivals. Captain Rios took her seat among maps. She did not sit alone. Admiral Anne Asule, hair iron-gray and posture like a compass needle, spoke for the Terran Expeditionary Command. Beside her stood Dr. Emilio Park, a mathematician whose hands drew geometry in the air as if the room could learn faster by watching his fingers. Behind them, an officer in marine black watched the walls the way carpenters watch load-bearing beams. Before we talk about weapons, Admiral Sewell began, we will talk about definitions. Defense is the art of buying tomorrow for children. Everything else is technique. Admired, Counselor Area said, we accept the definition. Name the storm. Doctor. Park brought up a volume of space. Not a map exactly, more like a weather model that had lost patience. Hot zones, cold rivulets, currents of attention. We model the eaters as distributed appetite, he said. They are matter conversion engines organized as a learning network. Think of a colony of ants that builds a new kind of ant when it meets a new kind of door. How many doors have they opened? Dr. Leora Venn asked. We know of 17 clusters collapsed, Park said. We suspect more. They prefer spiral arms. They drift like embers across voids until they find new wood. You have fought them, Admiral Vor said. He made it a statement, not a question. He knew the look of old bruises under clean uniforms. For 4 centuries, Admiral Sewell said. We stopped telling ghost stories to frighten our children and started training them to use fire extinguishers. Numbers anchored the air. 1,200 ships in this expeditionary force alone. 7 such forces spread around the local cluster. Sensor nets that braided the dark between galaxies. Latticework around their home star that could focus a sunrise. Cities built with more exits than entrances. Civics curricula that graded kindness and drilling with equal weight. It sounds like a life of war, Verdani Counselor Peril said. It is a life of preparation, Sewell replied. We are very careful with the difference. We teach our people that the point of a shield is to raise artists. Admiral Vor's jaw eased. That sentence sounded like home. Park shifted the display. Constellations of Concord species lit along the rim, Eth, Verdani, Threxians, Penari, the soft-tide Rel. We made a mistake early, he said. We tried to win alone. The Eaters learned us. They adapted to our rhythms, so we changed songs. Songs, Area repeated, invested now. Patterns of thought, Park said. Your mind is not our mind. That is not a problem to be erased. It is the advantage we intend to weaponize politely. He sketched assignments the way gardeners sketch beds. Vex form swarms to mimic social computation and overload adversarial heuristics. Eth energy matrices to reroute and singe at scales where equations behave like weather. Threxian boarding cotters trained to burrow into command knots and break the parts that pretend to be irreplaceable. Verdani BioWare to thicken the informational blood of the swarm and slow its learning. You are asking us to fight inside a machine the size of a storm, Counselor Peril said. We are asking you to fight where machines cannot think quickly in unfamiliar rooms, Admiral Sewell said, and to do so together enough that the room stays unfamiliar. Why now? Dr. Venn asked quietly. Why knock now and not after we are already ash? Because we finally spotted their scouts within reach of your children's sky, Sewell said. Because our monitors lit like the horizon lights when weather changes. Because most legends are warnings that came too late. We prefer ours timely. The Marine at the wall cleared his throat, a practiced permission slip. Ma'am, he said to Sewell. She nodded. He spoke. We do not come as saviors, counselors. We do not believe in capes. We believe in drills. The room hummed with a new voltage, not panic, not bravado, just the deep current that moves people when a plan takes shape around a fear. It felt like putting on boots in a firehouse that has not yet received a call. Admiral Vor stood. We have corridors and steel, he said. We have hearts that do not run when wind hits the door. Teach us your songs. And we will learn yours, Admiral Sewell said. Because a choir you only lead is not a choir that can harmonize when the conductor falls. Doctor, Park closed the model with a small gesture of mercy. We propose an experiment, he said. A controlled burn, an orchard to test cuts, a place where we invite the scouts to sniff our fence and then sneeze. We call that a trap, Vor said, pleased. We call it pedagogy for monsters, Park said. You will call it satisfying. They called the system Ironarch on old charts, a name meaning peacekeeper. We hid teeth in its smile, not sabotage, design. Above the pale blue star, scaffolds hummed that no civilian telescope could see. In the shadow of a swollen gas giant, our combined fleet fit itself into rocks and math. Concord ships floated visible and fragile near the inner worlds, their transponders humming lullabies about soft targets and routine patrols. Beneath that theater, Terran hulls slept under cooling veils, Verdani pods anchored in dust like seeds. Eth harmonics tuned the empty between moon and ring. Children played in a park on the Defiance-class carrier that carried the temporary name Borrowed Sunrise. The park was real. Soil and fruit and water that listened to gentle hands. We built parks in our ships for the same reason we built reinforced bulkheads, because you defend what you love better when you practice loving it. Through armored glass, the children watched stars and knew they were not myths. The stars watched back. "They are here," Kesari whispered on the iron current as three dark glints ticked into being at the system's edge. They did not arrive. They amended the map. Sensors tasted them first, a lace of fields that felt like teeth chewing patterns. The scouts skimmed the heliopause and curved inward, gossiping across ranges to listeners beyond the chart. "Let them talk," Admiral Sewell said on the net. "Give them gossip worth catching." We fed them exactly what they came for, a sky that looked slow, defenses that looked museum-grade, patrols that turned with just enough lag to flatter predators. In the under-ice of the plan, code seeds rode the ether like pollen, lodging in the mouth parts of their learning engines. The scouts sniffed the park ship because predators always count the small first. Through protective fields, children pressed noses to glass and made faces you only make when you know an adult is close enough to catch you if you fall. Admiral Vor watched the feed and felt his ribs become architecture. "Transmission phase," Dr. Park said. 3, 2. "Not yet," Admiral Sewell murmured. "Let them finish their sentence." The sentence finished. The universe took a breath. "Now," Sewell said. The star did not explode. It exhaled on a vector. Gravity lenses clicked like shutters in a cathedral, stacking the outflow into a coherent shaft that crossed a distance no metaphor can do justice. Where the first scout had been, there was instead instruction, atoms reintroduced to humility. The second scout reared. There is no other word for how a thing without body language communicates surprise, and met something we had not had before the choir. Eth resonance woven through Verdani biocrystal, sung through Terran carriers by Threxian timing. The universe rang like a glass on a sympathetic note. The scout fell apart politely. The third ran. Running is information. We let it, then we braided space in front of it into knots that ships call prayers and mathematicians call proofs, and we invited it to make a choice faster than it could think. It chose wrong 3 times in 1 instant. It died on the 4th. "Engagement complete," Kesari said, voice flat the way surgeons talk when the table is still. 4.8 seconds by Concord clocks. "Check the park," Vor said, and heard relieved laughter across 3 bridges and 1 garden. Dr. Park verified the other harvest. "Their transmission went home fat," he said. "Our little gifts ride along, not a kill chain, a cough. Their learning will slow, ours will speed." Admiral Sewell did not smile. People mistake smiles for victory and schedule naps they can't afford. "Record everything," she said. "Throw away nothing. Tomorrow's adjustment lives hidden in today's gloat." Captain Rios appeared on the shared channel, hair damp with sweat, as if gravity work collected on skin. "Counselors," she said, "you just did something no one has done on their first song. You fought together on the first chorus and stayed on key." Counselor Area's light pulsed with a kind of reverent anger, the moral kind that builds hospitals and fleets. "How long until the choir is tested by the whole congregation?" "Monitors estimate 90 days by your calendars," Rios said, "less if the scouts were faster students than we modeled." "Children need 90 days to finish a school term," Counselor Peril murmured. "Then we will give them 91, Admiral Vor said. It was not a boast, it was a work order. We seeded the system with memorial markers, not to grieve a victory, but to remember what it cost to earn the right not to grieve later. We hung practice targets where predators had flown, because drills are a covenant you make with futures you want to exist. That night, if it was night anywhere, the ship's park smelled like cut herbs and soil and charge from distant capacitors. An Eth tutor taught a Threxian child to hum a harmonic that made do stand at attention. A Verdani sapling whispered in photosynthesis to a human boy about light and patience. "Doctor," Leora Venn wrote a note on the codex slab that had started the knocking. "We are updating this entry. Legends are not biographies. They are instructions for how to behave when frightened." On the iron current, Kesari asked Admiral Vor a question cadets had asked instructors for centuries. "What if they are too much?" Vor considered the polite dark outside the hull and the not polite dark beyond that. He considered a captain who knocked, and a choir that learned harmony fast, and children who pressed their noses to glass with absolute trust that the glass was not the only thing between them and hunger. "Then we become more than we have been," he said. "That is the only honest answer a parent gives a storm." He looked at the countdown clock we had all installed in our heads and on our bridges. 90 days minus a song already sung. He did not hear drums, he heard a metronome. "Back to drills," Admiral Sewell said gently on the net as if reminding us to drink water. "Courtesy and gravity, we will need both. 90 days is not a season in space, but it is enough time for a culture to decide what it wants to be when frightened." The countdown didn't blink alone on bridges. It lived on factory walls and classroom boards and inside the margins of novels. "Defense is the art of buying tomorrow for children," Admiral Sewell had said, and every schedule began using that sentence like a ruler. Fields were replanted with sensors. Symphonies rehearsed in auditoriums that doubled as shelters. Logistics officers learned to say please and thank you to welders who owned the hour. Training broke and remade habits. ETH harmonics hated Threxian timing at first. The ETH preferred curves, the Threxians liked corners. Verdani biotechnicians flinched at the human habit of naming tools after storms. The first joint drill nearly became a polite disaster. The ETH shifted an energy sheet 3 beats early. Threxian boarding craft cut under the wave instead of riding it. Terran grav anchors tried to protect both and ended up protecting neither. "Again," Admiral Vor said, voice carved flat to keep it from kicking pride. "We are singers, not solos." Dr. Emilio Park stood in the middle of the wrongness and smiled like a math teacher finding an unplanned proof. "You're stepping on each other because you're guessing what the others will do," he said. "Let them tell you. Stronger communications, weaker prediction. You don't surprise your allies, you give them a clear beat to surprise the enemy." They coded the fix in an hour. The second drill almost worked. The third worked enough to scare everyone with how good it felt. Friction persisted. A Verdani engineer walked off a Terran yard, leaves rattling with offense because a foreman put speed over soil ethics for the new bio shields. Captain Rios left the war room, found the engineer in a garden dome, and apologized without a committee. "We'll protect your routes the way you protect our hulls," she said. "Teach my foreman where the line is, then help him cross it safely." The engineer returned to the line carrying a new sign, "Go fast but not past." Citizens demanded truth. Counselor Area went to broadcast with Admiral Sewell and Dr. Leora Venn. Area lit like sunrise and admitted fear the way a physician admits pain exists and can be treated. Sewell explained how shelters breathe and why drills feel like rudeness to leisure. Leora held up the codex slab and read a line she had translated during night shift. "We do not prepare because we love war. We prepare because we are tired of funerals that make weather in a city for years." Factories retooled. A Verdani nursery shipped seed armor that could thicken hulls with living mesh. A Threxian forge cut boarding pikes whose tips hummed with ETH micro chords. A Terran school taught gravitational hygiene to everyone old enough to carry a toolbox and to everyone too young to carry anything heavier than a story. The countdown crossed 60. Scouts probed along the rim, too small to be anything but nerves on the swarm's skin. Park seeded the dark with questions that would cost the enemy time to answer. "We're making homework," he told a class in the borrowed Sunrises Park. "They are smart. Smart is slow when you have to check your steps. We'll be rude to their confidence." The countdown crossed 40 and the universe tried a trick. A fragment, no larger than a boat, no brighter than a stubborn star, slipped through a forgotten comms relay in an unpeopled belt and drove straight for a commercial yard that had volunteered to make armor for shelters. Kesari caught it on a sweep because she had asked a sensor crew to be lazier and broader, not sharper and narrower. "Wide nets catch more weather," she'd written on a console label. The fragment cracked, not open but wrong. It unfurled with a motion that said appetite and sent a fly of learning threads toward the yard's appetizing data. Rios diverted 2 drones to die on contact while Verdani scrubbers choked the threads with friendly falsehoods. Admiral Vor arrived with the iron current and put real corners into the problem. "Why send something so small?" Counselor Peril asked on the debrief. "To learn whether we keep locks on the back doors," Admiral Sewell said. "Now they know we do, and now we know they know." The countdown crossed 20. People stopped checking it every hour it checked them. Crews ate on time. Parents rehearsed shelter walks until toddlers led them. Choirs practiced in underground stations because Admiralty had asked them to. "Not for morale," Sewell said when questioned. "For tempo, you'll hear why." The night before the number hit 10, Dr. Leora Venn found a passage in the codex that had resisted her for weeks. The original script used a musical notation older than any she knew. She called Park to the archive vault and played the line on a glass harmonica. "Counterpoint," Park whispered. "They didn't just sing louder, they sang where the other side couldn't hear itself think." He went to the war room and wrote a word on the big board, listening. Under it, smaller, "Silence is a tool." Under that, like a dare, "We can make the dark ring." At 10, the monitors lit. At 9, families slept in shelters as calmly as they could, beneath ceilings painted with maps of a sky that would still be there in the morning. At 8, Admiral Sewell told everyone to drink water. Rios checked the beat of her own heart against the metronome on her console and found them the same. Admiral Vor sharpened a boarding knife against an old superstition and smiled when the steel sang on the stone. The choir warmed up. They did not arrive as a wall. They arrived as weather. The first edge of the swarm came in like a bank of bruised cloud, shapes inside shapes, intent inside appetite. The ripples they made in the dark tasted like heat and hunger and a kind of busy joy. A bad machine is still happy when it works. "Mark Alpha," Admiral Sewell said. The choir began. Star lances woke across 3 systems, not to kill but to make lanes. ETH conductors bent the beams into gentle curves that herded the scouts and outriders toward fields seeded with Verdani fogs and Terran decoy masses. The goal was not destruction but confusion. Teach the enemy that the map lies. Teach it so often it wastes time doubting every straight line. They learned. They always did. The second wave adjusted, changing how it split across gravity gradients, ignoring pretty decoys, nosing along comms sent like hounds that had bitten radios before. "They've seen our sophomore tricks," Park said, calm and annoyed at the same time. "Good," Captain Rios said. "We brought graduate school. Threxian assault craft cut out of hiding and went where training said they shouldn't, straight into the glittering knots that passed for the swarm's command plexus." Admiral Vor rode the spear of the formation with a marine detachment in black. Their helmets wore ETH filigree that made targetters stutter. Their pikes hummed counter-harmonies that would teach whatever they touched to forget its shape for a precious half-second. Boarding a thing that thinks in the weight of a moon feels like leaping into a storm cell with a pocket knife and a prayer. Vor liked knives and didn't pray. He trusted drills. "Steel follows song," he told his squad. "Our job is to break the conductor's baton." Inside the plexus, the air wasn't air and the floor wasn't floor. It was decision path, slick with choices. The Marines moved by rhythm, not by sight. Left on the 3rd beat, drive on the 5th, cut when the counter-melody rises. They reached what Park's models had called a knot of preference, a cluster where the swarm's learning braided tighter to pass judgment faster. They planted a Verdani seed there, a living silence that would drink the noise and feed it back as emptiness. The knot faltered like a person about to remember a name and failing. "Extraction," Vor said. The path back had unraveled. Of course it had. Kesari, watching from the iron current, shoved a gravity ripple where a door would be if doors existed. The squad fell through a hole in the wrong place and landed where they were supposed to be. "Next time," Vor panted on comms, "we bring better holes." "Logged," Kesari said, requesting procurement for superior holes. Across the theater, the borrowed sunrise held a chord in her bones while ETH conductors wrote on spacetime with patient curves. The carrier's park had been evacuated 2 days before, the soil wrapped and stored, the fruit trees asleep in cold. But the ship remembered the way Dew had stood at attention for a child's humming, and the memory mattered. Engineers had tuned structural resonance to that frequency. Under the first full strike, the hull sang back. Plates wanted to hold, beams remembered how to be stubborn. The enemy learned again. They began to throw not just mass but questions, testing which harmonics broke shields, which angles slipped past grav anchors, which data frequencies slipped under Verdani filters. "They're taking our census," Park said. "Let's confuse their survey." Rio split her screen into 4. Eth harmonics, Verdani fogs, Threxian assaults, Terran grav geometry. "Rotate leads," she ordered. "No one pattern in command for more than 8 minutes. If you feel yourself anticipating the next order, you've stayed too long." Coordination is a luxury until it is a weapon. The lead shifted like a dance. Area's conductors drawing barriers like weather fronts. Verdani ops pushing quiet into hot places. Vor's spears knocking out more knots. Terran grav crews sketching corridors on the fly. The swarm stuttered. Not stopped. Not yet. But it lost a minute here, 40 seconds there, thousands of years of learned confidence traded for puzzle time. The price came due. The iron current took a hit that made the decks lean and the lights falter. Ethelace held the bridge long enough for Kesari to reroute compressors by feel and profanity. "Still here," she said, bleeding at one ear, grinning with too many teeth. "Permission to remain rude." "Granted," Vor said. In System Ironarch, the star lattice fired a beam the size of a city street at a chunk the size of a mountain and only managed to shove it into a safer path. "Big rocks," someone muttered on a civilian channel, and a dozen kids in shelters answered collectively, "require bigger shovels." Their instructors smiled tight and took attendance again. Hours stretched. The choir sang. The swarm adapted. The first edge passed and brought the stronger edge behind it. "They are learning our learning," Park warned. "We can't keep up by running faster on the same road." "Then we change roads," Rio said. "Leora, what did your midnight song buy us?" Leora Ven put the codex through the room like a candle in a cave. "Counterpoint," she said. "Not louder, not faster, elsewhere. Give them silence, not absence, designed quiet. Make them hear their own echo until they mistake it for us." "Write the play," Admiral Sewell said. "We'll hold until you bring back the pen." The plan fit on one page and took 3 species to read. Leora's translation had been careful and stubborn, an old human notation that married rhythm to topology, rests to geometry. Park took it and built a lattice of windows, periods where one part of the choir would stop singing altogether, not to recover but to teach the enemy the wrong lesson. Counselor Area added the ethic. "We will not hide harm in kindness. If arrest endangers a city, choose music instead." Admiral Sewell wrote the timing in the margin with a pilot's pencil. "Rotate command lead every 4 minutes. Hide the switch in the rest." "Silence is terrifying," Vor said when he saw it. "So is the moment before impact," Rio said. "We're swapping terror for choice." They called it counterpoint protocol and pushed it to every wrist and wall. Choirs that had been rehearsing underground now recorded their rests on hot mics, because the pattern of breath between notes mattered more than the notes. Engineers who had named tools after storms now named switchboards after lullabies. Verdani bioarchitects printed tendons that like to release as much as they like to pull. The universe does not expect restraint from frightened people. Surprising the universe is a tactic. The first rest came with warning. "Prepare to hear yourself." Area's voice carried across channels, calm as weather. Eth harmonics stopped. For 8 seconds there was only the work of gravity and the ragged music of heat and kinetics. The swarm lunged where it had learned to expect song. It hit the space where sound should be and slid sideways into a corridor Rios had drawn in leftover curve. "Again," Sewell said, breath even like a runner's. Second rest. Verdani fog ceased. The enemy tuned to consume BioWare and found vacuum and a fake scent. A Terran cruiser stepped into the gap like a brick into a doorway, took the shove with inertial dampers turned to kindness, and passed the momentum into a star lens that had been waiting like a patient catcher. Third rest. Threxians went silent and still, every assault craft banking cold, pikes dimmed. The swarm sent feelers for corners and found none. It overcommitted to soft places and met edges stitched with human timing. When the pikes lit again, they did so inside the plexus, where the learned map had not made room for them. The swarm adapted. It always did. It started dropping salt into the rests, little perturbations to make the quiet itch. It jammed comms when command leads rotated, trying to force a stumble. It sent decoy hunger to places where a city would panic if it thought the choir had left. "We knew they'd try to make us talk early," Park said. Holding in quiet is harder than screaming in noise." Kesari wrote this is still work on the Iron Current status board and pointed to it every time the bridge wanted to fill the air with updates that helped no one. Verdani ops braided their fingers and watched metrics, not feelings. Threxian pilots chewed the inside of their cheeks until the 4-minute mark gave them permission to move. Even the patient, flowing flickered with the effort of restraint. Then the enemy did something new. It bit the beat. An outlying knot jumped its own rhythm and slid through a rest window toward an evacuation convoy. The convoy carried elders and archives, the kind of cargo grief compounds. Rios diverted borrowed sunrise on a vector that made the ship groan. "We are not a shield," her helmswoman said, meaning we are a person and therefore not obligated to be broken. "We are a door," Rios said, and put the carrier between the knot and the convoy in a shape the knot did not recognize. The hull sang at the due frequency. The knot hit the song like a bird hits glass it cannot see and lost a precious second to confusion. It was enough. Vor's assault craft arrived mean with purpose and cut the knot open like a problem that had overstayed its welcome. "Cost?" Sewell asked. "Paint and pride," Rios said. "We'll buy more paint. Pride's cheap, children are not." Counterpoint found its stride. Rests began to land like steps in a dance the enemy hadn't learned. Leadership rotated so smoothly that crews felt the change only as a new way their hands wanted to move. In the codex, Leora found a margin note written in a human hand that the centuries had softened. When in doubt, let the neighbor lead the next bar. She sent the line to Admiral Sewell, who forwarded it to every captain with 2 words, "Do that." The swarm bent. A vastness does not break all at once, it decides to be elsewhere. The leading edge turned from coreward to out, seeking a simpler meal. "They're yielding the corridor," Park said, soft with wonder. "We built a place in the sky they don't like to stand." No one cheered. The choir held the last rest of the movement as if it were a child holding a bowl to the top of the stairs. Then Admiral Sewell spoke, and her voice belonged to every careful parent who has ever said now at a traffic light. "Finale," she said. "Harvest the garden." A finale is not a shout, it is a shaped breath. Across the theater, star lenses pivoted like sunflowers. Conductors raised soft hands and curved space in preparations that looked like humility until the lights came on. Verdani fogs thickened in narrow throats the enemy had taught itself to avoid. Threxian assault craft sharpened their corners one last time. Terran Grav crews laid out paths like chalk lines on a playground and wrote home at the end of each. "Mark," Admiral Sewell said. The lattice around Ironarch sang. Not the beam this time, that would come, but the supporting chords, counter-harmonies to unteach the swarm its new lessons at the exact second the old lessons failed. The star exhaled on a vector and met the curb the had built out of patient geometry. The beam bent without breaking and swept a swath of the swarm into a Verdani field tuned to teach the stuff of appetite how to clog. The remainder ran for a door that wasn't there. Rios had erased it with gravity a heartbeat earlier, and fell into a nowhere that felt like polite oblivion. Inside the plexus, Admiral Vor took his squad for one last waltz. The target wasn't a knot this time, but a nave, a vaulted place where decisions went to be blessed by majority before becoming orders. The Marines planted a garden there, small, stubborn machines full of seed quiet and corded teeth. The garden would not kill. It would keep the knave praying to itself until it starved of purpose. Extraction, Kesari said before Vor asked. She had drawn him a door with math and a scar, and he walked through it grinning like a man who knows which stories he gets to tell later. Borrowed Sunrise finally paid her price. The last redirect burned something deep in the ship's kind bones. Bulkheads sighed. A stringer cracked with a noise like old ice. On the bridge, the helmswoman put a hand on the console the way people touch an old friend's sleeve before saying something honest. "Not this hour," she told the failure. The failure listened. Engineers rerouted stress like shepherds. "Children?" Counselor Peril asked softly on a private line that carried leaves and breath. In class, Rios said, "Learning to grow things in cans. I promised them a garden when we're done. Hold me to it." The enemy learned. It always did. It tried to unlearn faster. The front twisted to open a new corridor and found a Threxian spear parked there, already angry about its existence. It tried to eat color and found ETH edges that tasted like mirrors. It tried to sing and heard our silence and forgot what the next note should be. Admiral Sewell watched the holos with the face of a person counting backward to keep the math honest. "Cost?" she asked each sector. Numbers came back, hulls abraded. Power banks leaned to yellow, crews tired but not breaking. Losses, some. Names saved for after the work, not hidden, never hidden. Park updated models without letting his hands shake. Leora closed the codex and looked at the room like a historian who has watched a myth become a policy memo. "Phase end," Aria said when the last rest landed and the last chord held. The swarm's main body did what storms do when they meet mountains. It went elsewhere to be weather over a place that did not carry our names. We did not chase. Choirs don't chase thunder, they write shelters and teach the song. Silence uncoiled across decks, the kind that isn't absence, the kind you earn. On the iron current, Kesari laughed once, short and shocked, the way you laugh when a knife stops on the last thread. "Still here," she said. She wiped her ear and found more blood and didn't mind it yet. Admiral Vor sat down for the first time in 20 hours and felt every bruise arrive with proper paperwork. He looked at his boarding pike and at the clean edge where duty had polished it and wanted to put flowers on it without being sentimental. The borrowed Sunrise turned very slowly toward home. On the park deck, engineers wheeled out wrapped soil and sleeping trees. Children filed in, eyes wide, voices low as museums. The helmswoman knelt and showed a girl how to set a tiny spade against loam, how to press, how to make a place for root. Admiral Sewell spoke to the Concorde, her voice rough with the dust of a finished room. "We asked for permission to help," she said. "You gave it, you helped us help, you led when it was your turn to lead. We kept a promise to the future as neighbors." Doctor. Leora then updated the codex entry a last time in the same hand she had used to write the first line. Legends are not crowns. They are instructions for frightened hands. She closed the slab and carried it to an archive not designed to be a tomb. Counselor area hung a plaque where light loved to gather. The choir of 13. Beneath it, smaller, courtesy and gravity. Captain Rios went to a quiet deck and called her parents and told them a story that had more we in it than I. Park slept sitting up with a graph against his chest like a book. Kesari wrote a procurement request for better holes and attached a photo of a grin with too many teeth. Admiral Vor visited the infirmary, told 3 jokes without smiles, and sat with a Marine while nothing hurt for a while. Verdani crews opened a jar of jam they had saved for news worth sweetening. Outside, monitors stayed lit. The garden keeps its tools clean between harvests. The dark remained large and full of appetites. We did not declare ourselves done. We did not build statues taller than the shelters. We published the counterpoint and the drills and the budgets and asked the choir to keep practicing. In the morning, whatever morning means in space, teachers gathered children in the park and talked about gravity and courtesy. They taught that silence can be a kind of music when you choose it on purpose. They taught that neighbors are not just the people whose walls touch yours, but the people whose futures do. The star rose on a vector that had saved a sky. The dew stood at attention when a child hummed for it. The glass between life and hunger stayed thick, and the hands that had thickened it went back to work. Because work is what love looks like when the storm is close, and you intend your grandchildren to be bored in peace. And in a vault beneath the spire, the codex cooled under Leora's hand. She wrote one more line for students who would read it in a century and think it was always obvious. When the knock came, we opened the door and kept our manners. That is how you win without becoming the thing you feared.